world that has seen so many wealthy and influential people unmasked and revealed to be egomaniacal narcissists. It's a world that has seen so much power abuse, authoritarianism, and violence from people and entities in power that it makes total sense that in the US, for example, public trust in government is at an all-time low. Authority is not an inherently good reason to trust unless you have reason to believe that authority figures have integrity, and there's no reason to believe that right now. Authoritarianism is like ego on steroids, and even when you look beyond the egregious authoritarianism problems being faced in the US right now, like ICE rampaging cities and killing civilians, if you look at other stories in media, you will find lesser symptoms of the same sickness. You will easily find influential people saying and doing things that are meant to feed or protect their own ego. I'm not saying people shouldn't be confident, but often we unconsciously say or think things that build on this rigid, constructed story of I, this identity that takes itself very seriously, and we have blinders on to the fact that it is at the root of suffering for ourselves and everyone who hears us make these unconscious statements. So as people see more success in their careers, gain influence, status, power, if they're unaware of how to recognize when their ego is at the wheel, the constructed I gets bigger and bigger, and the ramifications can be horrific. So because this often happens to influential people, we're going to examine today whether we think this guy, this very successful, influential author, has dismantled ego, gotten it to stop controlling him, while also seeing such huge success. And if he can do it, that would mean others can do it too. I'm making this because I have hope that leaders can have integrity, and we need to look for the signs of integrity and humility in people and help raise their voices. So, who is this guy? His name is Eckhart Tolle. He's an author and spiritual leader who's written 3 books that are cultural juggernauts in the self-help and spirituality categories: The Power of Now, Stillness Speaks, and A New Earth. We're going to focus today on A New Earth, which is all about ego, recognizing the ego voice in your head, separating it from what you really are, and then stopping it from unconsciously running your life. A New Earth was released in 2005, and it was and continues to be extremely popular, selling over 15 million copies to date. Now, a big part of the success was what you might call the Oprah effect. She first put it on her book club in 2008 and released a series of talks with Tolle, breaking A New Earth down chapter by chapter. Now, there's nothing inherently wrong in this platforming, but Oprah, in her decades in the public eye, does have a very public track record of sometimes making authority figures famous who may not, in my opinion, have a ton of integrity. So I don't trust that just because Oprah platforms Eckhart, he deserves it. Just listen to the way that she first introduces him back in 2007.
There he is. My guest today should be called, I guess, the father of the now, because Eckhart Tolle is widely recognized as one of the most original and inspiring spiritual teachers of our time. I personally think that you are a prophet, Mr. Tolle, and I was first introduced to your teachings back in the year 2000 when actress Meg Ryan was on my show, and she told me about this book and how it was really having a big impact on her life. And so I went right out and I got the book right away.
So she says 3 different things in a row about how great he is. She first calls him father of the now, which is a really interesting way of putting it to me, because the now is something that no one has ownership of, and she's almost making it a patriarchy, so that's kind of interesting. Then she says one of the most original and inspiring spiritual teachers of our time, and then she calls him a prophet. She's saying, I really think you are amazing, and also saying to her listeners, this is why you should listen to this guy. I give him this authority. He's super important. And then she goes on to name drop Meg Ryan, very high status person, popular actor, and then says that this high status person is the reason why she rushed out to get the book. Now, we know how these things go. We understand that Eckhart is Oprah's guest, and this is like considered the polite thing to do, is to glaze a guest, talk up a guest before you introduce them. It's also what she's saying to her viewers. Listen to this guy. But there's an interesting irony there, just to note that the person that she's talking to teaches people that they need to dismantle their ego, and all of these statements are very egoic. I'm looking at Eckhart after she does this, and I'm wondering, how is he taking this in? And does he give us any kind of clue in his response about whether he's a person of integrity? But this is what we get when he responds.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Well,
Doesn't give us any reason at this point to not trust that he is who he says he is, and that he's actually living his life this way, right? So let's back up a little bit and talk about what A New Earth is all about, what he's saying in this book. So there's what I would call a core duality within the book. On one side, we have ego, and we have many other words that he uses for ego. We have form, meaning kind of literally objects, identity, or thoughts, emotions, perceptions. We have foreground, and we have unconsciousness. And on the other side of the duality, against form, we have formlessness. Against ego, we have presence. Against objects, we have space. Against thoughts, emotions, and perceptions, we have something he refers to as inner spaciousness and awareness, sometimes, a lot of times he'll call it. Against foreground, obviously, we have running in the background, like being the observer of your thoughts rather than being your thoughts. And against consciousness, obviously, we have consciousness, being aware. So Tolle thinks that if we are fully living on the left side, if we are completely identified with form, with the story, that's another word for it, story, identity, holding really tight to who we are, our past, what's happened to us, the way that we think about things, and we're unaware that we're doing this, then we are stuck in this state of unconsciousness, and we'll make bad decisions a lot because we won't know that that is where it's coming from. We won't know when our ego voice is speaking. The way to move from the left side of this duality to the right side of this duality is awareness. Other words for this are noticing, naming it. He says the ego is not wrong, it is unconscious. So when you notice it, smile. It cannot exist as this illusion of who you truly are if it's being called out all the time, if it's being noticed all the time. It can't hide from that way of thinking. It's an illusion feeding into the story of who you are, and it's not who you are. And that awareness makes it melt away. And awareness is very different than fighting. He says in the book, you cannot fight the ego and win. This made me realize that I have been trying to fight my ego for years. I made a video on this channel 5 years ago about how ego sabotages your creativity, and I concluded that if you create with the intention to show someone that you care, then you can quiet your ego. I had recognized the ego voice, but trying to be selfless was the only way I knew how to dismantle it. When I wasn't being selfless, I would fight against it and even feel self-loathing for having the ego voice in the first place, when I could have just noticed it, laughed, and understood I didn't have to identify and become consumed with it. That's how you take away its power. You just can let it go. So now that we understand some of what Tolle teaches in A New Earth, let's look at whether we think Tolle is trustworthy. It theoretically wouldn't change the message if we found out that he wasn't. There's the whole separate the art from the artist argument. But for example, I'm not going to go watch The Cosby Show today, despite the fact that the writing in Cosby's monologues to his kids sometimes held great lessons. The hypocrisy of Cosby teaching someone about respect or morality ruins it. So I do want to know if Eckhart lives his teachings. So let's go to his website and ask, based on what we see, what does he want from us? What does he want people who believe his message to do? The first thing I see is to join his email list And then below the email list is a free trial to his community. So I decided to do the 10-day trial to see what's in here. So here are the prices. It's $20 a month, or it's discounted some if you pay for 3 months or for a full year. When I logged in for the trial, the landing page here had a 2-hour featured video. I searched his YouTube channel because he has a ton of videos on YouTube, and I found a short clip from the same talk, but it's not this whole thing. So far this is feeling like Patreon, where you get more content for subscribing. The next thing you get is access to a message board, which is not terribly active. Sometimes just 1 post per day, other times multiple, but I didn't see any more than 10 messages a day. But at least you've got the ability to chat with like-minded fans. Eckhart's fans should definitely be called Eckharts. Then there's a list of Zoom events, which again feels similar to Patreon. The ability to be in a live Zoom room with Eckhart or his affiliates. Then there's what they call monthly practice, which is a theme for the month of things to think about and questions to ponder, and also comes with a Zoom session offer. Then there's a page with a whole slew of products that range from digital guides and PDFs, it looks like, to courses and something called the School of Awakening, which when I click on, it says that it's 4-month advanced training, and enrollment is now closed because this is out of date and there's a wait list, so there's a lot of demand for this. When I've looked into it, it seems like he's been running courses like this for years. He and his wife will do them together, and he also does retreats. But he's been doing this a long time, and the retreats and the events continue. And I mean, if you have a ton of disposable income and you love Eckhart Tolle, they give you no shortage of things to spend your money on. So the answer to our question, what does he want from us, based on what's on his website, is that he wants us to keep buying Eckhart Tolle products. He's not saying, hey, you bought the books, that's it, you do the rest, you got it. It's a coordinated effort to continue to grow a lot of wealth. It's an enterprise, and it doesn't apologize for that. So my next question is, what should we make of this? It's coming from a guy who teaches about not identifying yourself with things and not having this rigid, constructed I. And from the outside, it does look like there's a very firm identity here in all these products he's selling, this kind of empire that he's built. But we're also not in his head, and we don't know how he thinks about it or what he does with the wealth that he accumulates. I'm far from the first person to ask about this or to spark this debate. What I discovered when I looked into this were some interesting points on both sides that I want to show you. So this is a thread from 8 years ago, and for context, the most current estimate I saw of how much money Eckhart might have right now is $80 million. And 8 years ago, it would have been less, but still in the tens of millions. So this is called Eckhart Tolle and his prices. For a man that talks so much about illusions, is he not aware of the disillusionment one can feel when they see their favorite teacher make it on the rich man's list? I looked and I could not find this, by the way. And not really knowing where that money is even going. We're going to talk more about that. Eckhart Tolle is the most spiritual teacher in the Enlightenment industry as of today. He pushes for this collective awakening, yet puts his online teachings behind such an enormous paywall. His newly announced Eckhart Tolle School of Awakening, what we saw that had the wait lists and everything, is almost $5,000. I just don't see how this supposedly egoless man could still charge so much when he's already swimming in cash. I would love to see him be more transparent with what he's doing with his money. So what are people saying about this? Someone compares him to Ram Dass, who has always donated all the royalties from his books to charity, raising millions of dollars for humanitarian efforts. We're going to talk about this being connected to ego as well a little bit later. This comment talks about some of the types of people who attended a retreat. I've been to one of his retreats in London, and I was shocked by the kinds of people who attended. I happened to be living a 10 minutes walk from the place, so it was convenient, and the price was 1 day of work, so it wasn't such a big deal. But they were all super rich people who came all the way from the US to London and stayed in a hotel just for that one retreat. They were the type of people living in luxury with Louis Vuitton suitcases, drinking Starbucks with tiny chihuahuas in their handbags, who I would really not expect to be involved with anything spiritual. From what little I could interact with them, they didn't seem to have a clue about the real message either. In other words, by charging so much, Eckhart has achieved that his message is getting delivered to the wrong audience rather than to people who need it. That's kind of an interesting comment because they're making severe judgments about these people. But they go on to say spirituality is not for people who happen to be super wealthy. It's simply for people who find they are interested in spirituality, whether they are rich or poor. This is not freaking golf. So barring the heavy judgment of other people in this comment, I understand that they're saying this retreat is like an exclusivity club, like a country club. A big part of that, I would guess, would have to be coming from like the Oprah effect. These people went there as a status symbol, and from this person's perspective, we're not deeply committed to the messaging. Then as we continue down the comments, we have talking about another one just reveals how you think about yourself. Then we have, there's nothing wrong with him wanting all the money he can get. He's famous. If you think enlightenment is being humble, meditating all day, wearing robes, speaking softly, and talking about deep things, you're mistaken. You have someone who says, is it sinful to be rich and affluent? Maybe that attitude keeps us in poverty. And when you look at his success and financial well-being, you become suspicious. Sounds like there's a condition in your mind that tells you that in order to be spiritual, one must not be wealthy. And I don't know what it is about people that they have something against money. You wouldn't hold it against Eckhart Tolle if he had a lot of health, would you? But somehow when a spiritual person has wealth, that's somehow considered evil. This is the kind of poverty mindset that keeps people poor. Maybe the floodgates to wealth opened for him when he let go of the egoic need to criticize others who have more money. I think this is true. I think that people have very strong, deeply seated opinions, feelings, perceptions on money, on people with money, on how to get money, and tying up their worth with money and their reputation. And it comes out when we look at people who have more than us. And I think the other side of it is that we are rightfully disillusioned by so many people nowadays who have so much wealth and have let the entire population down. That's kind of why I'm making this video right now, is faith in humanity being so low. So I think we are rightfully at a time when we're super suspicious. And then we have this person says money is only as good as the way it is employed. If he was charging that, then turning around and reinvesting it into the community, I'd be a paid subscriber. We have a blog post that's very similar. It's from a Buddhist guy named Christopher Titmuss. So Christopher Titmuss is a former Buddhist monk in Thailand and India, teaches awakening and insight meditation around the world. And he wrote a blog post that was very similar, just a little more in depth to the Reddit post that I read. And I just want to highlight the top comment here on this, which says, Christopher, I think your premise for the article is off. It's not about how much money Eckhart Tolle makes, it's about what sort of lifestyle he lives. The article doesn't provide any factual information about that. You do pose some good questions for Eckhart, but they seem nosy and could obviously lead to problems if he discusses all his financial information. I follow Eckhart and have never paid a penny to do so. I was given the book and I watch his free YouTube channel, free website, and other free sources. If people are willing to pay money to attend his classes, so be it. I paid money to attend a class at a Buddhist center last week and I thought it was well worth it. If a Wall Street banker pays $5,000 for a class and Eckhart donates the proceeds, isn't that more virtuous than not having any wealth to donate? It's jumping the gun to assume he's using his wealth to increase his own lifestyle / possessions instead of having a greater, more positive impact on humankind. So it's about what the money does. So let's listen to Eckhart's own thoughts on money and see what it might reveal to us. So this is a video from Eckhart's YouTube channel. He's addressing an audience. This is typically what kind of videos are on his channel, and the community online is him speaking about his teachings in a room.
Money can make people very unconscious. Even just some people, even just beginning to talk about money, especially people who have had an experience of scarcity in their childhood and whose parents were fearful around money, and money was always discussed in their family with negative emotions.
So he goes back to the idea of unconsciousness, a central theme of A New Earth, being unaware of the thoughts and emotions that we have tied with money and acting from this state of unconsciousness.
there was never enough, and so on. So I know I've met people who were relatively conscious in most of their lives, except the moment when money was mentioned. Then immediately it pulled them into unconscious reactivity, and not just necessarily huge amounts of money. It could just be, he charged me too much, it was $10 too much.
You could make this argument that the people who go back and forth in the comments of these threads talking about his money have this problem, that they're very spiritual, they're very awakened in many ways, but they have a certain hang up on money, and it makes sense. I mean, class is the number one thing that divides us. The number one issues are seated with class. I mean, it's just, unfortunately, the center of our world.
The entire bill was $200, but it was the $10. It's terrible. So just mention money and they become unconscious. For some people, there are other triggers that still make it. There may be some of you have certain triggers that make you unconscious. Whenever you think about it or talk about it, it could be, for example, your ex-spouse. Whenever you think or talk about him or her, you go, oh, it's awful. Or it could be money, or it could be something else, some other, your pet subject that you feel, something in politics, that the moment it's mentioned, you go become reactive. But for many people, it's money. So you need to observe that money is only, one could see symbolic energy. It symbolizes energy, and in itself is not problematic, but for many people it becomes associated with fear, the fear of not enough, and also ego. It becomes associated with ego. So how much money you have determines your worth. How much, this is a weird expression, how much is he worth? That's ridiculous. So what's your relationship with money?
So there's one more part of this where he talks about a friend giving to charity, and he reveals something about himself. So let's watch.
He probably won't even know I'm referring to him, but soon after meeting him, he gave me a list. He pronounced, well, I'm engaged in the following charities. This one, I've been supporting this charity for 15 years, and this is what is. Then I'm supporting this, and then I created that charity, and that it's wonderful work. But I could see he was already spiritually awakening, but his ego was clinging to his charities. So he's doing good.
Isn't that an interesting irony somehow, that your ego can also attach to the charity work that you do?
But it's not doing him much good, not his ego. So it's better to give anonymously, as I often do, to give anonymously. People don't even know where it's coming from.
If it's true that that's what he does, he gives maybe millions of dollars anonymously, then that's obviously wonderful. He also, just because of how much money he makes, he pays a lot of taxes. He reportedly lives in Canada and would apparently be paying 33% of his income every year in taxes. So that's also hopefully going far in his community and his country. There's also a video of him talking to a woman who lost her entire life savings in the Bernie Madoff fraud, and talks about what she learned from it and coming out of it with a different sense of identity, because she couldn't identify with her money anymore. It wasn't there anymore. So if Eckhart lost his life savings too, and then he were interviewed and we could tell that he didn't change at all, he was still exactly how we've always seen him to be in all his videos, then we'd know that he truly lives his word. But that's probably unlikely to happen. So look, it's not his job to get me, or anyone else for that matter, to trust him. He spread his word around the world, and he, and I'm sure a big team of business people, made it into this enlightenment empire. I've seen no signs of him trying to covertly turn it into a cult where they're actually just worshiping him. If he were going to do that, I think it would already have been done by now. So I think the answer to what do we make of this is we should reserve judgment for people who give us any indication of being not who they say they are. And I don't see any indication of that from Eckhart. I have enough hope to believe him when he says that he gives anonymously, and I think that's great because you see issues in donations all the time being used for leverage. You see people's names on buildings on a college campus just to raise their social status or get their kid into the college. And in a world where billionaires openly have rotten intentions, seek to deplete the earth's resources, abuse children, dominate, want to win at every turn, and they suffer from terminal cases of unconscious ego and malevolence, if we allow those people to continue to hoard the wealth and tip the scales, even worse than they already are, and we neglect to raise up people who have integrity, who also have money, people who show us over years in the public eye that they seem to have integrity. I'm still saying seem because I'm so worried, I guess, but I still have hope. So I'm going to continue to look for leaders who have integrity in the public eye and in my community, and I hope you'll do the same. Take care of yourselves.
Kendrick Lamar contacted me and says, I want to introduce your teaching into my rap music. I said, before you do anything, I want to talk to you. So I met him, and he was not how you would expect a flamboyant rapper to behave or look like. He was kind of soft-spoken, gentle, and able to listen. And then I said, okay, go ahead, you can mention my name and so on. So in the album that came out a couple of years ago, Eckhart Tolle is mentioned several times. You just have to listen carefully.